Hello Internet, and welcome to the channel. I'm Chameleon X, and if you've watched my previous video about playing a game of D&D set in the Fallout universe, you'll recall that I mentioned I'd be making a dedicated video about the race and class options that I created for that video. Well, this is that video. I'm going to be reskinning these class options to fit the Forgotten Realms campaign setting and releasing them on the Dungeon Masters Guild. So if you find anything I describe in this video interesting and or you want to support me, I'll have a link to that in the description. Otherwise, you can take the basic ideas I'm including in this video as inspiration to create your own homebrew content. As for character races, I'm just going to give you the details on those. I could probably strip the flavor from them and shoehorn the mechanics into a DM's Guild product, but I don't really feel like bothering. There's probably dozens of third-party race options that are reasonably similar to whatever I can come up with. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. So, all of the race options I designed for this campaign were pretty easy, since I'm using the new standardized rules from the more recent books. As such, each character race gets to choose their ability scores, +2 to one stat and +1 to another, or +1 to 3 different stats. Everyone gets common and a choice of one other language, and all of them except the super mutant can be medium or small size, your choice. In the PDF, I mention in a sidebar that dwarfism is more common in the post-apocalypse because of genetic bottlenecks and other factors, so playing a wee person is explicitly called out as an option for the other 3 races. Obviously, there aren't any fantasy languages like Elvish or Draconic, so players choose from Spanish, French, Italian, Chinese, and so forth. Also, all of the races have a speed of 30 feet, so I won't bother calling that out. As should come as little surprise, the most common race is human. Like 90% of the NPCs in the Fallout universe are humans, and they use the same stats as given in the vanilla game. Much like the new 1D&D rules, I just go ahead and assume the variant human is the default option, because honestly, who would give up a free feat for a +1 in all their dump stats? Speaking of 1D&D, I'm planning on incorporating the new rules for inspiration into the game for my next session, along with the new version of the human from the Unearthed Arcana. So, ghouls are the first new race option. Their creature type is humanoid. They are considered to have the FEV mutant subtype for effects related to creature type. For those of you who are familiar with Fallout lore, this could be a bit controversial, as even the developers of the original Fallout can't seem to agree whether or not the forced evolutionary virus had some part in the creation of ghouls. It's very much implied that ghoulification requires a specific genetic makeup and tends to run in families, but that's as far as we get for canonical confirmation, so if this trait bugs you, you can remove it. Another controversial trait I gave ghouls in my campaign is unusual nature. Specifically, in the original draft of my rules, I said ghouls didn't need to eat or drink. Since then, I have changed my stance on this, however. In the new version, ghouls don't need to eat, but they do need to drink. This is based on my own headcanon, wherein ghouls have adapted to use ionizing radiation as a substitute for ATP in their cellular metabolism. A ghoul exposed to sufficient levels of radiation would be able to remain alive, but would still need water to survive, and without raw materials like vitamins, minerals, protein, and so forth, they wouldn't be able to grow or regenerate damaged tissue. Either way, they still experience hunger and thirst, and if they don't satiate this desire for a prolonged period of time, the psychological stress can increase their risk of going feral. The third racial trait for ghouls is rad absorption. Ghouls are immune to radiation poisoning, and if they start their turn in an irradiated area, they regain hit points, equal to the number of rads they're being exposed to. This only works if they have at least 1 hit point though, so once they're unconscious, they don't continue to regenerate. Ghoulish expertise is their last trait. Due to their exceptionally long lifespan, non-feral ghouls have had a very long time to learn a trade or hone their skill set. They gain proficiency in a skill or tool of their choice, and also double their proficiency bonus for checks using that skill or tool. Super mutants are the next race I added. Their creature type is giant, and they are, obviously, also considered to be an FEV mutant. Their size is medium, but they have the mighty stature trait, which is basically powerful build, with the added benefit that they can grapple creatures 2 sizes larger than them. Their second trait is called Panimmunity Virion. They are immune to all diseases as well as the effects of radiation poisoning. Finally, they have the half-orc trait Relentless Endurance. Once a day, when they would drop to 0 hit points, they can choose to drop to 1 hit point instead. The third and final new race I added was the Synth, which turned out to be a very popular option. So popular that I have to beg my fiancé to play a human instead. Their creature type is Construct, and their main feature is called Artificial Human. It provides a list of benefits. You're immune to disease, you don't need to eat, drink, or sleep, though you can mimic the appearance of sleep in order to blend in, while remaining alert and aware of your surroundings. They can also benefit from healing spells despite being constructs. Synths also gain the synthetic strength trait. You can add your proficiency bonus to a strength check or saving throw, proficiency bonus times per day, with expertise if you're already proficient in that check or save. Finally, they have the targeting software trait, which allows them to use VATS without having a Pip-Boy. This was the most time-consuming part of making my homebrew rules, but also the most fun. As I mentioned in the main video, I toyed with the idea of creating a classless system, but if you wanted something like that, you could just use a different game system than 5th edition D&D to emulate that. Instead, I focused on using the existing class system of D&D to make a subclass option for each class that emulates something in the Fallout universe. In addition to subclasses, I also added a bunch of variant class features for the base classes to patch some holes in the vanilla rules and more closely simulate the tropes and combat style of a Fallout game. For example, a lot of classes like the Monk, Barbarian, and Paladin are pigeonholed by their class mechanics into using melee attacks. I added optional rules to all of these classes that opened up the use of things like Divine Smite, Rage, and Martial Arts to be used with ranged weapons. I'll get more into the specifics when I touch on each class individually. Starting with the Artificer, I created the Robotics Engineer Specialist. It's basically a modified version of the Battlesmith. Your main feature is a robot companion that you build, like a Mr. Handy or a Protectron, and you get extra infusions that you can only use to mod your robot. This robot gets more powerful as you level up, and each version of the companion comes with its own stat block and special traits. The capstone of this subclass lets you disable constructs within a certain radius for a minute, but only works once per day on a given robot. As with all of the spellcasters in this rule set, I tried to tailor the bonus spell list to those which made the most sense for the setting. In the case of the Artificer, I focused on spells that revolve around manipulating or enhancing objects, as well as a few spells like Grease and Wall of Force that could be easily reflavored as technology rather than magic. The next class is the Barbarian, for which I created 3 class feature variants for the base class. They basically amount to more verbose ways of saying, you know this class feature that says it only works on melee attacks with strength? Yeah, you can do it with guns now. For the subclass option, I created the Path of the Gunzerker, which, as its name might imply, is focused around filling the air between you and your enemies with as much hot metal as possible. It also serves as a template for creating a dual-wielding barbarian, as some of the basic features you get at level 3 are designed to eliminate the action economy cost of 2-weapon fighting vis-a-vis entering a rage, and patch that system to work with automatic firearms. The 6th and 10th level features, as with most barbarian subclasses, are primarily utilitarian or defensive in nature, rather than adding a direct combat benefit. Basically, a Gunzerker can carry more stuff without getting encumbered, and you're more alert to danger and harder to surprise. Because you've been so accustomed to having automatic weapons firing continuously right near your face, you gain advantage on saves against being blinded or deafened. Finally, the capstone is basically the same as the Berserker subclass, but with guns. The Bard was a bit challenging to come up with something that fit the Fallout universe. Eventually, though, I created the College of Journalism, inspired by characters like Piper from Fallout 4 or Three Dog from Fallout 3. Its defining feature is that you gain an iBot companion that comes with a linked microphone, and you can use your iBot to broadcast your voice from up to a mile away. As you can imagine, this provides a number of other benefits related to the Bard's other features, as you no longer have to be physically present in a location in order for your allies to hear your voice. The capstone for this subclass is the ability to give a rousing speech which can last for as long as 10 minutes, which affects everyone who can hear you, including through your iBot. This grants a number of potent benefits which last as long as you keep speaking, but it expends 2 uses of bardic inspiration. My fiance's character, Juliet, chose to play as a bard of the College of Journalism. For the Cleric, I added the variant feature Armor of Faith, which allows a character to give up their armor proficiency in exchange for adding their wisdom modifier to AC while they aren't wearing armor. This is a generic option I usually give to my homebrew clerics and paladins just because I like the image of a holy warrior wearing priestly robes instead of chainmail. The subclass I designed, which should come as no surprise for those of you who've watched my Fallout Adventure synopsis video, is the Atom domain. This cleric is blessed by the holy light of Atom, and seeks to spread his blessing across the wasteland. The main feature is that you don't die from radiation, and you actually gain increasingly powerful benefits from accumulating rads. At first, these effects are balanced by the negative effects of rad poisoning, but as you gain levels, you become more resistant to radiation, to the point where dosing yourself is a purely positive experience. The Channel Divinity, which I also mentioned in the video, allows you to release a blast of radiation that doses everything around you with rads. Any creature immune to rad poisoning, such as ghouls and super mutants, will be healed by this pulse instead. The Druid was a tricky one, since it's basically impossible to flavor wild shape as something scientific unless you're willing to bend suspension of disbelief over a barrel. So, as a variant feature, I added Nature's Ally, which basically allows you to trade wild shape for the Primal Beast Companion from the Tasha's Cauldron version of the Ranger. I considered as an alternative a subclass that would allow you to wild shape into a mutated abomination, but I decided that would be a bit out of the Druid's wheelhouse flavor-wise. It would probably be a better concept for an antagonist for the party to fight anyway. Instead, I borrowed inspiration from the 4th edition Essentials Druid to create the Circle of the Sentinel. The Sentinel Druid gives the class a martial-focused option. Basically, the Sentinel is to the Ranger as the Blade Singer is to the Eldritch Knight. You gain martial weapon proficiency, a fighting style, extra attack, and a primal version of Blade Song that keys off wisdom instead of intelligence. I was careful to design this subclass so that it was compatible with the Nature's Ally variant, but not necessarily requiring you to choose that feature. That said, if your players do choose Wild Shape instead of a Beast Companion, I would suggest modifying this subclass so that their Blade Song equivalent requires them to burn uses of Wild Shape to activate. The Fighter was the repository for all the new fighting styles that I came up with, and the Ranger and Paladin reference these styles in their own sections. All of the styles are named after weapon perks from the Fallout series, and have effects loosely based on those perks. The Fighter subclass, the Survivalist, puts pretty much all of its focus on exploration and, obviously, survival. You get expertise with a couple Ranger skills in Urban Explorer, which, as the name suggests, is a variation of the vanilla Ranger's Natural Explorer, except that it specifically only works in urban environments. They also gain features related to mobility, stealth, and navigating dangerous or difficult terrain, and their capstone grants them damage resistance for a turn whenever they use Second Wind or Indomitable. As I mentioned above, many of the variant features I added were attempts to patch holes in the ranged combat options of certain classes. In this case, I added firearm proficiency to the monk and allowed them to use one-handed guns as monk weapons. I also added a feature called Hip Shot, which allows the monk to spend a key point to make a ranged attack with a firearm as a bonus action. The last variant I added was Continuous Flurry, which allows the monk to just use Flurry of Blows once a turn without expending key points. Now for the subclass. I had a lot of difficulty coming up with a good concept. Most people who've played Fallout before will know that unarmed combat is always an option, but is rarely developed in the games as something to base a build around. You can do it, and it works, but it never really gets as much focus as guns or melee weapons. Eventually, after soliciting ideas from my group, I settled on the Way of the Machine Fist. This monk, in their search for perfection of mind and body, has chosen to abandon the frailty of mortal flesh and begins replacing parts of themselves with cybernetic implants. This subclass's defining feature is that you get to choose a number of implants equal to your Constitution modifier, which you can swap out when you gain a level. Whenever your con increases, you get to choose another implant, and they all have interesting effects, like letting you generate force fields, see in the dark, execute a double jump, and shoot cluster rockets from your chest. Apart from the implants, most of the other class features are designed to turn you into a tank. One of the major shortfalls of the monk as a warrior class is their glass cannon status. So this subclass aims to address this by giving the monk tons of added durability so they can function as a frontline powerhouse. Those of you who have watched my Fallout Adventure video might be aware that the super mutant in the party, Mr. Extreme, is playing a Way of the Machine Fist monk. For the Paladin, the main thing I added, aside from the aforementioned fighting styles, was a variant feature that allows you to just smite with ranged attacks. As for the subclass, unlike some of the other classes, this one was pretty obvious. The Oath of the Techno Knight gives you a free suit of power armor, and gives you various bonuses while fighting in power armor. Your Channel Divinity lets you turbocharge your power armor for a minute at the cost of draining your fusion core faster. or otherwise lets you unleash an EMP that disables nearby constructs. The Capstone feature lets you supercharge your power armor even further, granting you regen, extra damage, and also granting bonuses to your allies if they're in power armor. The Ranger, as in Tasha's Cauldron, got way more variant features than any other. I basically took the Ranger's class features from 4th edition, aka the only edition the Ranger didn't suck, and grafted them onto the 5e Ranger chassis. I also granted them access to the new fighting styles I made and added the Improved Awareness feature, which is an upgrade that makes the Primal Awareness feature not utter garbage that nobody will ever use. For the subclass, the Tribal Warrior Conclave is inspired by the shamanistic wasteland tribes we see in Fallout 2, 3, and New Vegas. You gain bonuses for wielding simple weapons, and your Natural Explorer feature is upgraded to work in any wasteland environment, regardless of your favored terrain. The 7th and 15th level abilities are variations of the options given for the Hunter Ranger, while the 11th level feature allows you to double your proficiency bonus to a weapon attack roll proficiency bonus times per day. The only variant feature I gave to the Rogue was Rapid Reload, which allows them to reload a firearm using their cunning action. The subclass, which is being playtested in my Fallout adventure by the Synth Mark IV, is the Raider archetype. This class is all about using traps, improvised weapons, and pack tactics to gain the upper hand in battle. Their defining features are the Scoundrel's Tricks, which are basically equivalent to Battlemaster maneuvers, except they require you to expend sneak attack dice to use them. Expended dice are recovered at the start of each of your turns, and the general idea of these tricks is to trade the raw damage of sneak attack to inflict status conditions on your target instead. This one is a bit silly, but it was the best idea I could come up with for the Sorcerer and seemed to fit well with Fallout's campy pop sci-fi setting. The Atomic Mutant Sorcerer origin is the Hulk. You become the Hulk. You get proficiency with armor, shields, and martial weapons, you get natural armor, and you can use a bonus action, proficiency bonus times per day, to Hulk out, becoming a large-sized, muscle-bound warrior with a d10 hit die and all the benefits and drawbacks of a Barbarian's Rage, at the cost of shredding any armor or clothing that you happen to be wearing at the time. I like this subclass because it presents a completely different playstyle from any published Sorceress origins, almost like turning the Barbarian into a full class and sticking it on the Sorcerer chassis. I gave the Warlock 2 variant features, bonus spells and Eldritch Magic. The former simply adds your otherworldly patron's expanded spells to your spell list as bonus spells without them counting against your limit of spells known. You know, like every other spellcaster in the game. The second just straight up gives you Eldritch Blast and Hex also as bonus spells without counting against your spells known. In the case of Hex, this feature also allows you to cast the spell proficiency bonus times per day without expending a spell slot. Out of all the classes, the Warlock is probably the one I had the most trouble with. Not because I didn't have a concept for it, but rather because I struggled to come up with features that fit that concept without making them too overtly magical to fit the setting. The Whispers from the Deep is meant to allude to the many Lovecraftian references that can be found in the Fallout series, particularly in the Bethesda-made titles. You are heavily implied to receive your powers from some unknowable entity that is somehow related to radiation and ghouls, but I tried to make all of the features such that they might possibly be explained by mutations and psychic abilities brought on by radiation. To that end, all of the bonus spells for this subclass are enchantment or illusion effects. The basic features allow you to visually perceive radiation as a glowing mist, and you can use this rad sight to effectively approximate dark vision in irradiated areas and to see irradiated objects and creatures as if you had blind sight. As you level up, you gain resistance to radiation damage and start experiencing prophetic dreams that mimic the Divination Wizard's portent ability. The Capstone feature allows you to mentally dominate any creature that's being exposed to radiation for up to 1 minute once per day. And finally, we have the Wizard. This was another class that, like the Warlock, I had a strong concept I wanted to work with, but struggled a bit to come up with mechanics that fit the concept I was going for. Before we get to that, the only variant feature I added was Arcane Focus Expertise, which is basically a direct copy of the class feature of the same name from the 4th edition Wizard, which gives you one of a few different benefits based on what type of arcane focus you specialize in using for your magic. The subclass was the arcane tradition of the Field Scientist, loosely inspired by the class of the same name from D20 Modern. I will admit that I'm not entirely happy with this subclass, mostly because I was rushing to finish it before the first session of my Fallout adventure, because I knew one of my players, of the character Ned Ridley specifically, was going to be playing a wizard, and his backstory made it pretty obvious he was taking this tradition. My original intent was to offer a choice of scientific disciplines like physics, biology, chemistry, geology, robotics, medicine, and so on. You would make your choice at second level, and this would inform the class features you got as you leveled up. As a result of having to rush, though, I cut this down to just 3 options: chemistry, biology, or physics, and only the second level feature actually depends on this choice. The field scientists can add their intelligence modifier to their AC and initiative rolls, can study a creature for 1 minute to learn certain bits of information about its game statistics, get advantage on saving throws against mind-affecting spells, and the capstone makes it harder for other creatures to use counterspell or dispel magic on you. Not bad, I know, but still not quite what I was going for flavor-wise. If I have the time and my wizard player is okay with it, I might go back and overhaul this subclass later to make it closer to my original vision. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share if you like this kind of content. I'm still trying to get a handle on exactly what kinds of videos would do well for the channel, so if you have any observations, criticisms, advice, or what have you, don't hesitate to leave them down below. I'm totally receptive to any kind of feedback, even if it's not exactly positive. Plus, even calling me an idiot counts as engagement that feeds the algorithm. Anyway, thanks again. Until next time, I've been Chameleon X, reminding you to always duck and cover.